never knew how much I loved my daughter until I could never tell her. At that moment, I would have traded every medal, every commendation, every promotion for just one more second with you. We'll be together again, Starbuck. Not now.
Hello, and welcome to Discovering the X-Files, the podcast in which a newbie takes a deep dive into the entirety of Chris Carter's universe, while longtime fans escort me on the journey, a perilous journey filled with government conspiracies or weird monsters every other week. I'm Erix Antoine, and today Daniel and I will be discussing One Breath, which originally aired on November 11th, 1994. It was written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong, and directed by R.W. Goodwin. In this episode, Scully is found comatose in a hospital. Mulder investigates what's happened and comes into contact and conflict with the smoking man, of course, but also with his allies, X and Walter Skinner. This mythology adventure heralds the return of Gillian Anderson to the cast after a one-episode absence, and introduces Scully's sister Melissa, played by Melinda McGraw. There's a bunch going on here and lots to talk about. Daniel and I are about to break it down. Stick around.
Didn't expect you here till after visiting hours.
There was a man. He took Scully's blood.
Forget him.
Get that gun out of my face.
You got him killed. You got her killed. That's not going to happen to me. You're my tool, you understand? I come to you when I need you. Right now, you're heading in a direction that can lead them right here.
I owe her more than just sitting around doing nothing.
She was a good soldier, Mulder, but there's nothing you can do to bring her back.
She's not dead.
Listen to you. Listen, you're a damn schoolboy, Mulder. You have no idea. I used to be you. I was where you are now. But you're not me, Mulder. I don't think you have the heart. Walk away. Grieve for Scully, and then never look back. You will be able to live with yourself, Mulder. On the day you die.
So yeah, One Breath. This has a very, it's kind of a poetic title.
Yeah.
And, you know, the fact that it has a sort of poetic title maybe plays into the episode as a whole. There's a certain hokiness to the episode where, you know, it's perfectly fine. But the title is taken from, I'll call it the monologue that Don Davis gives about halfway through the episode when, you know, he essentially speaks to Scully in this sort of purgatory type place, where he tells her that, you know, he would give anything to, if he'd had a chance, you know, to be with her again, to see her again, and whatever else, but essentially saying that this is not her time yet, and so on. And so that's for like One Breath. But what I'll say, like up front, I'll say that I was a little bit surprised that it was that quick. I thought we might get one or two more episodes, like without Scully, but no, she's back. Because I mean, the reason was because her baby was about to be born, and so she was ready to pop, I guess, and it was like, all right, well, you know, I need some time off. And apparently, what happened was that the baby was born, and she was back to work within days of that happening.
That's insane.
Yeah, I know, it's unbelievable. And so they said, okay, fine, you're back to work, wonderful. We'll fashion an episode where you're just required to lie there for the entire duration. It's like you're basically, you spend the entire episode in bed. So how about that? Fine. There's a line at one point where X says something to the effect of, You're not going to see me for a few weeks or so. He implies that it'll be a while before he contacts him again. And I imagine that there's almost a meta text to that where this is going to be the last mythology episode for a while.
For a little bit, I think, yeah.
Yeah, at least for a few weeks, like for a few episodes. It's going to be, like the next handful of episodes are not going to be mythology based at all. They're going to be traditional Monster of the Week episodes. And so it seems to me a little bit like, okay, so this is the last mythology. We're going to step away from the mythology for a while. So let's just give you a really good heaping helping of of mythology and like character development and all that stuff. And reportedly, this is a very well-regarded episode by the fan community. And so I wanted to hear your take on it.
I didn't have much memories of this one, and I'm surprised because I ended up liking it a lot this time. But I always just remembered it as the episode where Scully is back in the hospital. That's where it always stuck in my mind, but I didn't quite remember all the details of it before I sat down to watch it again.
Yeah, I really liked it too. I think it might be the best mythology episode so far. At least the one that has felt like the most involving to me. Mm-hmm. Like maybe because they're so focused on the emotion. So on one level there's that, but then beyond that, I do think that it provides there are a lot of juicy moments for characters that you see on screen. There are a lot of fireworks, a lot of like intense fireworks. You get great scenes between like Mulder and Skinner. You get an amazing scene between like Mulder and, I guess we're going to rechristen him Cancer Man, since that's like, he's actually named. He's actually, in this episode, he's actually finally named, and they refer to him as Cancer Man, not Smoking Man. So now I'm confused. Like, ultimately, what is this character's quote unquote name? Because there's all of these monikers for him, and
we generally fans always refer to him as the cigarette smoking man. I don't remember if he's ever actually called that on screen. And then of course you've got Mulder and Skinner calling him the Cancer Man here, and we will eventually get a name for him. It might not be his original name, but we will get an actual name for him on down the line.
Okay, like an actual name, like a name, not just a code name. But anyway, like this is probably his biggest. He's never had these many lines of dialogue before.
Definitely not.
This is like his first big scene, and it's a doozy. It's a good scene. I like some of the stuff he says. That like that one big thing. Mulder's got the gun right in his face, and he's like, like, oh, don't think you can scare me. I've watched presidents die. Like, I love that one line. Like, I've watched presidents die. And then you get a big moment between X and Mulder, and in the parking garage of the hospital, where it's a really intense, dramatic scene, and it gives us some interesting insight and really try to give us kind of a contrast between who X is and who Deep Throat was. And how these are very different people. They're operating on completely different levels. Even if they're going towards the same goal, they're operating on a completely different level. And so X is much more aggressive. He's pursuing the same goals, but he doesn't have that same drive to be a martyr. We get the sense that Deep Throat ultimately sacrificed himself. He knew the stakes, and he was willing to let that happen. As long as it protected Mulder, he was willing to give his life for it. Mm-hmm. X is not willing to give his life for it. No. He will take lives with no hesitation. He will take lives. Deep Throat, we found out ultimately that he was doing all of this as a kind of atonement. So maybe he had that whole guilt, that burden of guilt that he was carrying, and that might have played into his, let's say, sacrificial decisions. But in the case of X, like we don't know what he's about yet, but we definitely know that he's not necessarily about whatever Deep Throat was about. And because right in front of Mulder, he just executes that guy with no remorse, no hesitation, nothing. He just executes him right then and there.
Executes.
What does he say? He says, because in the end, when he sort of passes it to Mulder, and he's like, all right, these are the guys. They're going to go to your apartment. You're going to be there, and you're going to defend yourself with terminal intensity. Yes. So that's how he looked at it. He was like, well, I have to deal with this problem with terminal intensity. Yeah.
He's a really interesting change up. I mean, he's definitely not positioned himself as a mentor like Deep Throat was. He's very much on a different side of the coin. And then he even has that one bit in his monologue about, you are my tool. I come to you when I need you. I do not work for you. You work for me.
Right. Yeah, that's a very key difference. And even when, because you have that cool little thing where he puts the X on the window, and that's kind of a callback to, there was something he did in the first season.
It was a colored light, wasn't it? Was it a blue light or?
I think so, yeah. I think it was like a colored light. So that was his way. And whenever he did that, Deep Throat came running. And so the quote unquote, the proverbial bat signal for X is, make an X out of masking tape on your window, and just. And so I love that because it really plays with audience expectations, because we know what he's doing, we know what's going on. There's like that cheeky aspect to it. Oh, I get it. That's how he contacts X. Okay, fine. That's how he does that. That's cute. And then he opens the door and there's this newspaper on the floor, and you're like, how interesting. He's obviously giving him some information, and there's nothing. It's just a newspaper. There's nothing going on. And so I thought that was funny. That was a very clever way to sort of play with expectations, with Mulder's expectations, but also with the audience's expectations.
Mulder gets so mad too.
He's so pissed. He's so unbelievably pissed by that. And he says as much. It's like, I called you for help. You were supposed to come help me, and I don't know what. And that's where he gets that big, hey, listen to me. You work for me. I don't work for you. So I don't know. Get it straight. You know what I mean? Yeah. And yeah, there's a little bit of insight. That whole thing where he goes like, I used to be you. Mm-hmm. He's like, I used to be you, but you're not me. He's making things very clear. Though, when the chips are down, he does help him out. Yeah. He does show up to save Mulder when he gets cold cocked. He really could have been a little bit more alert to just he's got the gun trained on him, Yeah, it's like, you could have easily kneecapped him, just to make sure that, just to incapacitate the guy a little bit, and then, but no, he had to leave him pretty well and able to defend
on the
himself.
Head.
Yeah.
And then X waltzes in and Steven Seagal's the guy's elbow.
Exactly.
Snaps it right in half.
Just does. Yep. Like, there'll be no need for you to interlock your fingers behind your head, because you're not going to be able to do it. And he's all like, all right, now just stand over there. Bang.
Well, the funny thing about that is, I had remembered him killing the shadowy agent down in the boiler room, but I didn't remember that the first shot doesn't kill the guy. Like, he clearly shot him in the head, but then when he's still standing there talking to Mulder, you can hear the guy like gurgling and moaning in the background, and then he shoots him again.
Right. So, yeah, just to make sure.
I get
that. I was gonna say that too. I was like he told him to stand over there, and then he shot at him, and I was like, because he was executing him. But then I go like, okay, well, I guess he figured, shit, he's still alive. Damn it. I thought I'd aimed better. I only nicked his ear or whatever. Yeah. Like, shot his eye off, but he's still alive. Needs one more. Boom. There's a lot of good stuff here. There's Skinner. His interplay with Smoking Man is very good. And how Smoking Man doesn't give two shits about that sign. It's like, thank you for not smoking. And he looks him right in the eye, pulls a cigarette out, lights it, takes a puff, then walks off to one side, almost as if he's trying to be, at least more okay, I'm not going to smoke in your face. But no, he just and then leaves the cigarette there, leaving the office reeking, and then walks out, takes 2 puffs, and walks out of the office. So like their relationship is interesting because you get the sense that, I mean, it's the thing like that where Skinner can't stand them, but he has to like
Oh yeah.
tolerate him. He, for whatever reason, he has to tolerate him because, as we found out a few episodes ago, Skinner also answers to someone.
Yeah.
So he can't just, he needs to tolerate this guy. He needs to take that shit for whatever reason, because whoever pulls his strings is also pulling Skinner's strings. So on some level, at least, that seems to be the case. And so you get a terrific scene between him. You get 2 terrific scenes between him and Mulder. You get the big blow up scene where Mulder gets all like, he gets all sassy. Like that whole thing about, he goes like, who was shot? I don't know anything about that. No, I don't, like, I was with Scully. I don't know what you're talking.
What did the police report say? Mulder, you
Right.
know perfectly well there is no police report.
Well, how would I know that? I wasn't there. I was with Scully. And then he's like, you see how it feels? You see how it feels to get denials and then so they have a really great like relationship, and just the way that Skinner's just like, all right, don't give me that shit. And so like that's great. And then you get that wonderful scene where Skinner refuses to accept Mulder's resignation. And he tells him a story about Nam, which is a very believable story about Nam. It's very, that the person who was telling that story lived those events. There's something very cool about that scene.
Well, we find out that he wasn't drafted. He straight up volunteered to go to Vietnam, which is a definite, I mean, it gives you more insight into his character, or at least what his mindset is. And then, of course, he's talking about his out-of-body experience that he had when he almost died.
And about the time that he had to kill a 10-year-old kid who'd walked into the camp with grenades, right?
Yeah.
And how he talks about losing his faith. Or, well, he talks about he said that he basically felt that was it. Like if you're in a situation where that's what you have to do, that's all bets are off, right? I mean, if you're put in a position where it's part of the mission, you have to do it. You have to look at a 10-year-old kid and blow his head off, because that's how he says it too. It's like, I blew his head off.
Yeah.
From 10 yards away. So yeah, this guy has history. This guy has history, and Pileggi really plays into that very well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Duchovny does some fine acting in the episode. He was given a chance. This episode came about because Duchovny wanted his own Beyond the Sea.
Yeah.
That's all. That's about, like, I was looking into that. He wanted his Beyond the Sea type of episode that allowed him to explore the character, go to some emotional places, and yeah, it's very telling that this is an episode that does that. But the connection, what he's grieving over, is Scully.
Yeah.
Not a member of his family, not his sister, but Scully. So it is interesting that they made the choice to take the character in that direction. Not that they're building up any kind of romance, but they definitely tap into a very strong connection between the 2 characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so to avoid the romance aspect, what they do is they give Mulder a sense of guilt.
Yeah.
That on the one hand, yes, of course, he's upset that Scully is his colleague, his partner, his friend, and he feels terrible for what she's going through. But the other part of it also is that he blames himself, because he feels that maybe he wasn't, that he put her in harm's way.
I love how he vocalizes that to Skinner, and I don't know if he was expecting Skinner to say, no, it wasn't your fault. And instead he's like, nah, maybe it was, man.
Yeah, no, Skinner is definitely, he goes like, yep, well then you're just as responsible for this as Cancer Man. And, well, that's an interesting thing too, because now because I think Skinner's position is very clear. He's clearly, he's kind of a middleman. He's in charge of Mulder, but there's somebody in charge of him.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Smoking Man is clearly in a position of authority that also where he has to tolerate him. Not that Smoking Man is his boss, but he's still somebody that he doesn't really have any power over him. So he has to kind of sit there and take his shit. So the only way he can deal with it is to do relatively underhanded tactics, such as to go ahead and pass Mulder his whereabouts in a sealed cigarette pack, which is interesting, like how that happened. A pack of Morleys, and I love how they don't even bother. Like it's a Marlboro, like it's a pack of Marlboros, but they just stick a different name on it. But they even use the same font. Like they don't care. It's like we don't have the product placement, but who gives a fuck? We'll just Morley's. That's the cigarette. That's the brand. Um, okay, so we know what Skinner's position is, and we know that basically he's doing what he can within his power. He reopened the X-Files. He basically gets that Mulder is trying to do the right thing. He says as much. You know, he even goes like, that he feels terrible about Scully, that he liked her and he respected her, and it's unfortunate that things have gotten to this point. But he expects he expects cooperation from Mulder regardless. And then you have Smoking Man, who basically says, because when Mulder puts the gun in his face and says like, why? Smoking Man is like, because I like her, and I like you too. That's why I brought her back to you, or so he says something like that. And so now we're in a situation where, because he says, I'm driven to do the right thing. I believe that I'm doing the right thing. And I ask myself, but what is it that you're doing? That's the part that's still murky. What exactly is this? Who really did take Scully? Because when we saw that, in Ascension, when she's taken, I guess you don't actually see aliens, do you?
No.
Yeah, she's on a bed and there's like all these contraptions, there's this machinery, there's all this stuff around her. We're assuming it's aliens because that's what Dwayne Barry says. We're assuming that that's what's going on, but to be honest, that's not what we actually see. We see her being experimented on. We don't know by who really. We're making assumptions. And now we can further assume that she was taken by these government agents and then dumped somewhere or taken to the hospital. But we still don't know to what end. And so that is intriguing.
Yeah, as far as the alien stuff goes, we only ever see aliens interacting with Dwayne Barry. We don't see them interacting with Scully at all. Another thing I like about their conversation is that Cancer Man keeps referring to it as the game and Mulder as a player, which obviously is a very different outlook on everything than Deep Throat or even X have.
Yes, that is a very intriguing aspect, and like he has a new respect for Mulder.
Yeah.
He's like, you actually had the balls to come in here and put a gun in my face, and I'm not afraid of you, but I certainly respect that you had the balls to do that.
Yeah.
I'll give you credit. I'll give you that much. This took balls, and so good for you. Like there's this sort of I respect that. I see now that you're a player. But it is immediately after that scene that Mulder decides he wants to resign.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, does he do that because he feels that he failed? Because he couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger on Smoking Man?
There's a lot of different ways you can read that. It could be him viewing himself as a failure and maybe the X-Files as a lost cause at that point. It could just be him shedding himself of all moral, legal obligations before he just goes buck nuts. There's a lot of different ways that could go.
Yeah, because at that point, as far as he's concerned, Scully's going to die. So he figures that he was unable to save her. He was unable even to find justice. Because like there's that whole thing, right? Where Skinner's like, this is the Department of Justice, right? Yeah. And Mulder's like, that's what I want, So he was unable to bring Scully's victimizers to justice. He was unable to resolve anything. And so at that point, yes, he's kind of at the end of his rope. This episode deepens Scully's family. We
Yes.
see, we see more. We see her mom again, who we already have seen her in previous episodes, but we meet her sister for the first time, and her sister turns out to be a bit of a new age kook.
Yeah.
I that was not something I saw coming. I didn't, because we have not seen this character in any form before, right? This is the first time
No,
we're seeing her.
I can't remember if she was at the father's funeral or not, and I think both of the brothers were.
Yeah, they certainly wouldn't have focused. They didn't focus
No,
on
and they
her in
didn't
any
focus on
case.
any of the three siblings.
Yeah, they didn't. And so here we meet the sister, and there's some interesting fireworks between her and Mulder. Almost like they want, like the writers are trying to make something of this. There is chemistry between the two characters, definitely. And it's a different sort of energy than the energy between Mulder and Scully. I would say in this case, there is a kind of sexual energy there. There is
A
a
little
kind
bit,
of
yeah.
romantic attraction that, I don't know, maybe they'll play into it eventually. I don't, you know better than I do, but that's the impression I'm getting from the way the character has been introduced.
It's funny the way we see her interacting with Mulder and the mom, because on the one hand the mom clearly loves her, but every time she launches into her new age spiel, the mom starts rolling her eyes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which is funny because the overall picture we get of that family is that Papa Scully was always very proud of the other three and had a very contentious relationship with Dana. But it looks like the flip side with Mom. Mom got along with Dana great, maybe not so much with Melissa.
Yeah, exactly. This aspect of I guess paternal favoritism. Yeah, that's an interesting thing because I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. Now that I'm thinking about it, you definitely have that sense, and they really put that idea in your head in a way. And it's interesting because I'm watching The Crown on Netflix,
Oh yeah.
and that has nothing to do with the X Files. So I'll be very very brief with this, but in it has to do with this one theme. A recent episode of The Crown kind of has deals in something that happened historically, which is that Margaret Thatcher's son went missing when he was participating in the Dakar race through Africa, and so he went missing. And so Margaret Thatcher breaks down. She's like in tears, and she's like talking to the Queen, and she just comes out and says that that's her favorite son. And so that opens up the episode, and so there's this. The whole episode is basically about the Queen trying to determine which of her children is her favorite, right? And Prince Philip is very direct. He's like, yeah, Anne is my favorite. And so then the Queen now, the whole episode is about her sort of meeting with each of her children to determine which is her favorite. And they go into that whole thing about like parents who have multiple children and who have to decide on favoritism. And it's an interesting theme. And it's hard for a parent. I'm a parent, but I only have one child. But I can't imagine that. I can't imagine the idea of having multiple children and having, and maybe even unconsciously having a favorite. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's something that goes on in some families. Maybe it's something that psychologically happens. Again, I don't think it's something that anybody is conscious of unless they actually make themselves conscious of it. Like I come from like, my father comes from a family of multiple siblings, but I'm an only child. So that concept is interesting to me. And you have more than one child, correct?
Yes, I have two. And I have a brother, but
Hmm.
I've never personally had a lot of experience with directly with multiple siblings. My mother was one of three, but there's a bit of a caveat there in that her older brother was mentally impaired, so he never really just branched out like everyone else does in life. My dad was just one of two. I'm one of two. I have two. obviously my relationship with each of them is different, but that's just mostly based on their different personalities.
Mm-hmm.
There's, as far as I know, I don't have any favoritism over either one of them. But then on the flip side, my mother-in-law was one of 10 kids. And I guess I can conceptually see how once you get past a certain number of children, the odds are high that there's definitely going to be at least a certain section of them that you get along with way more than you do with the others. It's just the law of averages at that point. So, Scully is one of what, 4 kids?
Yeah, it's 4. It's
So
4. At least, yeah.
I guess I can see that happening. And
Yeah.
with her father, clearly she was the one that was always needling back at him and not always doing what he wanted. And then, maybe perhaps that's the way Melissa is with the mother.
Right. Right. Interestingly, though, although in the flashback that opens the episode, you see the 2 brothers,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a whole thing about, well, she was a tomboy, so she used to go out and play with her brothers, and she used to go hunting with them and all that. You don't see the brothers in the episode itself.
Right.
They'd make no appearance, and I thought it was strange. I thought it was strange that
It is odd.
Because you show them in the flashback, you make us aware that they exist. You make the sister very involved in what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
to a degree that she's there, very involved. She's at the hospital. And so it just seems weird that that they're not there, and that there's no explanation for this, unless there's something I missed.
No, the only thing I can infer maybe is that this episode only takes place over a couple of days. Maybe they just hadn't made it into town yet. But there's also no dialogue to that effect. There's nothing saying that oh, your brothers are going to be here in a day or two, or so and so can't make it until Wednesday next week or something like that.
Yeah.
But you would think there would be a sense of urgency in there, for the simple fact that they start going into Scully's living will, which Mulder is the witness for, which also again deepens how close their relationship was as friends. But the fact that they talk a lot about taking her off of assisted breathing, it does make it weird once you get to that stretch of the episode that the brothers aren't there yet. Because the implication is that once they take her off of the breathing machine, she's probably going to die.
Right. Yeah, like soon after, within a day or two. It's inevitable. And that's exactly what I was getting at. I mean, there's that whole scene where the decision is made, and the mother says, "This is a family affair, but you're welcome to participate, Mulder, if you'd like." Right? And Mulder's having none of it. He wants nothing to do with it because he's completely opposed to the idea, and so he's not going to participate. But this is a family affair would imply that, okay, well, it's not the whole family, is it? I mean, it's just mom and sister. Yeah. So that's why it is strange, and I don't know. I mean, like you said, it can be explained if somebody wants to sort of try to look into the logic of it. Yes, it could mean that the brothers simply, they live far away. They live in other cities. They live, it's not as easy as just getting on driving over to the hospital and just going home. They probably live far away. So for them, it would imply a plane ride. It would imply a complicated series of things, which they're not going to do unless it's an emergency. And as you said, the episode only takes place over a couple of days. So, but for that one thing, it's like, hey, we're taking your sister off life support. It might be good if you guys are over here, at least for moral support. Let's all stand in the room and hold hands and sort of be there for each other at this terrible time. So that I just thought that was weird, that you introduce the characters and then you do nothing with them. I did like the sister. I thought it was a good actress. I thought it made sense that she's Scully's kid sister. It sort of, it was kind of, they cast well. They cast an actress that could pass for Gillian Anderson's sister. And the fact that she's a new age kook is an interesting wrinkle. that maybe, like a lot of the arguments that Scully has with Mulder, you can imagine her having similar arguments with her sister, like growing up, about just the beliefs that her sister might have about certain things. So that's cool. But I don't know if I appreciated the overtly new agey symbolism, the visuals.
Oh yeah.
The way they chose to represent Scully's where she is, she's like on a boat in a foggy lake, tethered to the docks,
or in the bed like David Naughton in American Werewolf in London.
Yeah, in this like white room with like a tunnel, and she's like on like a wooden slab, and the boat thing was more like, it was imagery where like you half expect to hear like Enya playing in the background, like when they take her off life support, the very on the nose, the rope snaps and she floats away, and like it's fine, but I do think that those things, it's a little on the hokey side, where I'm not sure I get what they're doing. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't. It doesn't really bother me, but I do think it's a little bit hokey. I'll leave it at that, I guess.
Yeah, it brings to mind, my wife's a big Grey's Anatomy fan. She's probably watched through that entire series, which I think is on like its 15th season now. She's watched through the whole thing at least 3 times.
Jesus.
Yeah, I know. But this is the kind of episode that's become prevalent on shows like that when you have a character on death's door. They always play into the will they go or will they stay thing. They always have the weird imagery, and they usually play something like Enya or Sarah McLachlan or Lorena McKenna over their symbolic shots. So it's funny to look at this and see that stuff being used here. I don't know how prevalent it was at the time, but it's the kind of episode that's used a lot in modern melodramatic shows now. Obviously, without the conspiracy and alien abduction trappings.
Right. Yes. Well, the whole idea. Yeah. You know what? It makes sense for shows that are melodramatic, the medical soaps, like Grey's Anatomy or ER. I think when they go on for that long, eventually you have characters that get written out, and usually they get written out by being killed. So it wouldn't surprise me if they have sort of a melodramatic sort of spiritual death scene, something like that. I mean, I don't know. I don't watch Grey's Anatomy, but it's a known quantity, So I'm aware that there was a very popular character who was eventually written out of the show in spectacular fashion, and I'd be curious to know if his death scene had Enya playing in the background, as or if it was anything even remotely like this.
There's been stuff like this. My running joke with her, and she doesn't always appreciate it, is that whenever they're going to remove a character from that show, other shows like it, but specifically Grey's Anatomy, they either build them up as this great person and then kill them for maximum impact, or they turn them into an asshole and then have them leave town. There's literally no in between. Either they're a saint and they get killed, or they make them an absolute asshole so the fans won't miss them anymore and then ship them off to another city.
It almost would make sense to do it the other way around too. It's like make the character make the character really, really unlikable so that fans, number one, hate the character, and number two, want to see them die. You know what I mean? So then the two things are just sort of, I think it would work better that way, rather than grab this beloved character and then, oh, look how much you love him, and we know you love him, but you know what? Bye. And so it's just it's interesting. There is one aspect, the final button to the episode, and so I was wondering what you thought of this, and not only what you thought, but if there's any relevance to this. I mean, there is one new agey aspect which sort of comes up as a little twist ending. Where you have Dr. Owen, right, or Dr. Owens, the nurse that is caring for her, and I was not sure how to feel about that thing at the end where it turns out that Dr. Owens, quote unquote, has never worked at this hospital. Dr. Owens never existed. And so I wasn't sure if they were trying to imply that Dr. Owens was some sort of spiritual thing, like an angel or something that was watching over her and sort of guiding her through, or much like her father, basically, in a certain way, or if Dr. Owens is actually something that's going to come up again.
Yes.
That's the thing. Now, without spoiling specifics, because if she is going to come up again, that's fine. You can say that, just don't say when. And go ahead and tell me your what this is all about.
As far as I know, she doesn't show up again, which means she's either some sort of guardian angel or they've finally done a ghost in a non-weird way.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's what I thought too. I thought if there was going to be something shady about Dr. Owens, like if she was some kind of a double agent and who was pretending to be a nurse at the hospital and was just there, it didn't seem right. Like the way they were handling it. So then my instinct is correct. It is more of the new agey thing.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sure how to feel about it. Because it is interesting when you have a show like this that, as we've discussed before, goes into paranormal topics, but always tries to ground them in a believable reality of some sort. They tend to avoid metaphysical things a little bit, that where you're already going into a spiritual aspect, where you're already going into the spiritual realities of life after death. But in this episode, they very, very explicitly touch on it.
Mm-hmm.
They very, very explicitly go into, they basically say, yes, there is life after death, in a manner of speaking, because I suppose you could interpret the scene with William Scully coming and sort of telling her it's not your time. You could interpret that as a dream. Mm-hmm. As a sort of, as a dream she's having while comatose, that it's not actually William Scully, his spirit coming to her. That's not actually what's happening. This is just something that she is dreaming. And as we know, she has some unresolved emotions regarding her father because of there are certain things that were just not resolved. And so it would make sense for her to sort of want to maintain this connection. And even at a moment where she's at death's door, that's when she would have this kind of dream. So you can explain that away. Don't know. I mean, and then I guess you could explain Dr. Owens too that way, that it's just something that she hears in her head or whatever. Because, okay, I appreciate that they don't explicitly tell you, yes, these are ghosts. Yes, there's life after death. Mm-hmm. They just give you the sort of suggestion that there is. And so I think that's intriguing, but I'm not sure if it fits with the ethos of the series as a whole. Do they start to explore this a lot more going forward? The idea of life after death, the idea of spirituality. Does Don Davis show up again?
I don't particularly remember anything along those lines, but I wouldn't be surprised if something similar comes up at some point. Just given the nature of a series like this and one that's run for 11 seasons and 2 movies. But you're right. I think what makes it weird is, they're playing with spirituality and metaphysical stuff, but they're toying with it in mostly a positive light. It's not viewed as something super mysterious that could potentially be dangerous or as outright malevolent like almost everything else they deal with on the show. So it feels like way sweeter and more saccharine than anything else they usually play around with. So that just kind of sets it a little bit to the side.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. All right. So what's the final word on the episode? You said it turned out to be better than you remembered, or at least like you ended up really liking it now that you revisited it. You didn't remember this episode, but you really enjoyed it now revisiting it.
I thought it was great this time. It's just a great piece of character work all around. I mean, you get more with everybody. You learn. Well, we're always learning more about Mulder and Scully, but we learn more about them. We spend more time with Scully's mother. We get to meet Scully's sister and get to know her pretty well within the small confines of this episode. We get way more back history with Skinner. We get a deeper peeks into Cancer Man and Mr. X, and we haven't really talked about it yet, but we even get a big chunk with the lone gunman. Frohickey shows up at the hospital with flowers for Scully when she's...
Yeah, a very non-creepy thing to do.
Yeah.
He's just sort of just being very decent. He's just coming, he's trying to be a good guy. That is cool. You're right. We didn't really touch on that, but they do show up, and they do provide some interesting details. And well, there is one thing. I mean, I'm getting the sense, because this is a mythology episode, so there's some stuff that's unresolved. Because we still don't know exactly who did this.
Yeah.
We certainly don't know why, and we also don't even know what exactly they did.
Yeah.
There's something where we saw her being experimented on in ways that were somewhat inexplicable, but now we know that there was some genetic material put into her body, and
the waste product is killing her.
Yes, exactly. And so you sort of figure, like, what did they do, And so that stuff is an intriguing button, but as Stephen Williams told us, we will not hear of this for at least a few weeks. Yep. Because it's going to be a bit before I contact you again, Mulder, which means sit back and enjoy some Monster of the Week episodes for the next few weeks, and then we can maybe come back to this, because I know we will. I'm sure we will. Oh, yeah. But I guess in a sense, we've often compared this to. We've always tried to put it in perspective of like modern series, and so I guess this is only about. This is the 8th episode or 9th episode of the season, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's not really halfway through. However, this whole thing that happened, Scully going missing, and then her coming back and being in a coma. It's very much what a mid-season break would be for a network show today. Like the mid-season would have been, the mid-season break would have been Mulder out in the field looking up into the sky, and then the return from the mid-season break would have been this, which sort of preps us for what's to come.
Why her and not me? Answer me!
I like you. I like her too. That's why she was returned to you.
You should be the one to die.
Why? Look at me. No wife, no family, some power. I'm in the game because I believe what I'm doing is right.
Right? For you to decide what's right.
Who are you? If people were to know of the things that I know, it would all fall apart. I told Skinner you shot the man in the hospital, but I didn't really believe it. And here you are with a gun to my head. I have more respect for you, Mulder. You're becoming a player. You can kill me now, but you'll never know the truth.
And that is that. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. And if you did enjoy it, there are many ways you can support this podcast, which is available on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms. You can subscribe. You can rate and or review it, depending on what platform you're enjoying it on. And of course, you can share and spread the word on social media. Please do any or all of these things. Every little bit helps. Look for the Erix Antoine Network on Facebook or on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at ErixAntoineNet and check out my film reviews on Letterboxd. You should also check out Daniel Baldwin's website, theschlocketeer.com, and follow him on Twitter at Daniel W. Baldwin. I'm Erix Antoine, and I'll be back in a few days to discuss Firewalker, which I'm sorry to say has nothing to do with the Chuck Norris movie from the 80s. My good friend Natalia Castro will be on hand to talk about that, and I hope you'll join us. Until then, please remember that the truth is out there. See you next time.